This is the scene of last night's very smoky, late night, socially distanced conversation. That's the last remaining bottle. I've cleaned away the other empties on my homemade bar. And yes, I had a friend round. I had a friend in my garden, and it was wonderful just to reconnect with somebody and have a chat and chew the cud and just have a few beers and relax. I mean, I am talking to people, but mostly on the internet or family, so this was something different, something special, especially because it was David Charles, a friend of mine who is a writer, an adventurer, an all-round really decent human being. And despite having a few beers and me trying to hold the my flinchy arm after all those beers whilst filming, and then the smoke constantly billowing over, I did grab a few minutes of the conversation, so I'll tag it on the end of this. So yeah, enjoy a moment from last night and David Charles talking about what he's up to right now.
My name's David Charles, and 9 years ago I went on a bike trip and I cycled round the whole of Britain. It was 4,110 miles, and it was the first time that I'd ever done a cycle tour of that size. I knew nothing about bikes. I left on a 50 quid bike that I'd bought from a police auction that was a total wreck. It broke on day 1, it broke on day 3, and it finally broke on day 5, somewhere outside King's Lynn. And 9 years later, we're in the middle of a global pandemic, which means that I can't go on my 3rd edition of Thighs of Steel, which is a bike ride from London to Athens, which obviously can't happen at the moment. So I decided that I would reprise my misspent youth and go on another bike ride around Britain. Obviously we don't know what's going to happen, and I don't know how much of this ride I'll be able to replicate, but I'm currently in a beautiful little garden, and this morning I cycled into King's Lynn, having done, I'm not actually sure, but I cycled from Bournemouth around the coast to London, and then London around the coast of Essex, Suffolk and Norfolk, and rode, I have got to say, in some triumph into King's Lynn 9 years later, and seeing how much I've changed in those 9 years has been really gratifying, and the main reason for that is because of all the experiences that I've had cycle touring in that intervening period, and the kindness and the hospitality that I've been shown that through cycle touring. And one little story kind of was the turning point for me, just outside of King's Lynn. So 9 years ago, my bike broke and I started this 8-kilometre trek to King's Lynn, and about 3 miles out, I met a guy who's was then in his late 60s, early 70s. He was riding a little blue racer, and he came towards me, and I didn't want to make eye contact even, because I was ashamed, because, you know, my bike had broken, I didn't know what I was doing, I was sleep deprived from wild camping for 4 nights with this piece of crap bike. I didn't know whether I could continue the trip, and he kind of took me under his wing a little bit, and made me feel okay about what I was doing. And I'll never forget, one of the things that he said was, I hadn't been telling anyone about my plan to cycle around Britain because I felt like I wouldn't be able to achieve it. And he kind of very gently gave me a little clip round the ears, and told me to stake a claim on that ambition, and to be proud of it, and to tell people what I was doing. And he very gently suggested that maybe I should get different bike. And so later on that day, I went back to London and I did indeed buy a new bike, which is the same one that I've used ever since, and which has carried me here today. And the contrast between that last trip and this trip is that one friendly man in Kings Lynn was pretty much the only person I spoke to in those first 5 days of cycling around East Anglia. And this time around, I have been taking full advantage of the lockdown easing to visit all of my friends that I didn't have 9 years ago. And that has shown me how precious these last 9 years have been. Not because, you know, whatever, like, you know, being a writer or becoming a writer, that's kind of a side issue. What's been important to me of these last 9 years, and what has really been brought home to a lot of us during the pandemic, is that it's the friendships that we make that are really important. So I'll finish there. But if you would like to, you might be wondering what this is. This is a bugle that I bought in Hastings to help celebrate the birthday of a friend who's now, I hope, my friend, in a white magic rebirthing ceremony. And that, for me, symbolises the difference between this trip and the trip 9 years ago. There is no way little scared Dave from 9 years ago would have had the gall to go into a junk shop in Hastings and buy a bugle, and to then carry that bugle around the coast of Britain with him for no other reason than to make people laugh at how appalling I am at playing this instrument. So if you would like to hear more from the bugle and from my kind of post-Brexit, mid-COVID, pre-apocalypse ride around Britain, then you can find out more on my Friday newsletter, which is at davidcharles.substack.com. And many thanks to my good friend Documentally for making some of the documentation of this trip possible, and for his wonderful hospitality. Cheers.
Cheers to you.
Smoky?